Welcome to the modern mystic. You're here now. It's soft and strangely silent. The night has made room for your quietness. You can let go here. No one else is listening, not really. Tonight, you're drifting with an old friend. Carl Jung, you can sink into the pillow, no pressure. The world outside is gentle and faded, and for a while you are far away from anything sharp or bright. All the stories can wait. The only story you need is this one, slow, unhurried. Jung once said the soul is like a secret garden, quiet and deep. Maybe you feel this too, the pulse of your own thinking, slower at night. Maybe you remember the hush of late hours, the breath that fills a small room. The old floor creaks, a book stays open, unread. You are not alone here. There's a wooden desk somewhere inside you, covered with stray paper and dust. A cold mug sits in the circle of lamplight. You hear the whisper of wind outside a cracked old window. You lean back for a moment. Let your mind go foggy, swirling with the shapes of sleep. The air is neither warm nor cold, but somewhere in between, a place your thoughts wander when they want to remember. Jung's story isn't a lesson. It's a soft hum under your skin. Every life has echoes of waiting, patterns that come and go. Tonight, we just walk slowly beside him. Your breath matches his, steady and low. You are not in a hurry now. Nothing is needed, not even understanding. Imagine a heavy coat draping your shoulders, a little protection from the night air. The silence holds you, the way old wool does, just enough weight to let go. He was a watcher. He moved with the slow dignity of someone who had sat many nights with his own thoughts. He waited by the window, clouds shifted beyond the glass, hiding the moon. Jung sometimes left his pages blank, just to watch the midnight sky. He believed in the healing of quiet hours. It's okay to believe in them too, at least for tonight. The kettle grumbles in the kitchen, somewhere behind you. The ceiling is marked and familiar, you know every line of it. Time falls away. Pages turn. Nothing happens, and that is enough. He wrote sometimes only a sentence. Sometimes he sat and let shapes gather behind his eyes. There are deep red curtains in this memory. They hardly move, your breathing slows, and the world shrinks to a single worn chair, a soft blanket, a cup cooling in your hands. This is how nights begin. You are safe to drift, safe to let words wrap you like a slow song. Listen for the sound of old paper when it bends, the tap of a heel on wood, the hush between heartbeats. This is the heart of Jung's story. Not the things he did, but the way he moved through soft spaces. Slow, unfinished, sacred. He turned the lamp lower. He leaned forward to rest his elbows. There was never any need to rush, not when the walls were full of memory. Even the shadows moved more slowly here. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Just a quiet corner in the long night, shared with a gentle mind. The clock ticks once, and the sound falls away. You've made it here for now, you don't have to go any further. A window opens to the cold, and the air is clear but soft. Breathe in. Exhale. Let your thoughts dissolve just a bit. This isn't a history. This is a slow remembering. A quiet keeping. One page, one step, one gentle night at a time. Jung waited by the window, you wait too. And nothing happens, and that is enough. A morning creeps up like fog, not all at once, not like a clock springing forward, but like the slow unfurling of a wool blanket over bare shoulders. It is always a little colder than expected. Carl rises before anyone else in the house, the chill meeting him at the edges of his skin. The wooden floor is cool under his feet, not cold enough for shock, but present, persistent. He stretches, listening for quiet. The soft hum of wind sneaking under the windowsill, the distant chime of church bells far down the lane, nothing urgent, nothing sharp. Just the sound of a house still deciding to wake up. His room is spare, built for thinking and not for distraction. Sheets ask for straightening, as if he owes them something gentle. The heavy woolen robe waiting on the arm of the chair, always the same deep grey, he pulls it around himself, its weight a silent promise that he won't be leaving soon. He sits at the edge of his bed and listens to the old house, the way Wood remembers footsteps from the night before, the sigh of yesterday's air in the hallway, the mute echo of his own breath. Nothing happened, and that was enough. On the small table beside his bed, a crusty brown teapot waits. He fills it with water from a blue ceramic pitcher, pouring slowly so the dribble doesn't spill, doesn't startle the morning. Everything is deliberate, no rush, no hurry. He sets the pot over the low flame, the hiss of gas a quiet heartbeat in the stillness. In his left hand, the cup feels almost too cool to touch, but he holds it anyway, waiting for warmth to seep in slowly, the way first light slips beneath the door. Carl walks, half awake, to the narrow window. His fingers brush the icy pane. Outside, the world is blue and grey, streets drowsy with fog, rooftops blurred like half-remembered dreams. He rests his forehead against the glass, feeling the faintest prickle of cold. The robe's thick collar shields him from the sharper drafts curling at the join between sill and glass. Only a whisper of air makes it through, not enough to disturb, just enough to remind him he's alive. He waits by the window. Every morning, the air holds the scent of yesterday's rain. Damp earth, faint smoke from a neighbor's chimney, a little tang of wet stone. Carl doesn't rush. He lets the minutes stretch, rubbery and slow, as he watches the street, sometimes a dog, sometimes a cart, sometimes no one at all. He presses his palms together, warming chilled skin. In time, the teapot clicks and hisses, then spits out its promise of heat. He pours the dark tea, the stream shining briefly in the half-light, and it perfumes the quiet like the memory of another country. He carries the cup to his desk. The robe brushes against his legs, thick and coarse, holding the cold at bay but not erasing it. The chair is hard. He likes the firmness beneath him, the plainness of the wood seat. He leans in, letting both hands cup the tea. Steam nudges his nose, fogs his thoughts. He sips very slowly, letting the taste fill his mouth before drifting back down his throat. Bitter, earthy, faintly floral. He tries to notice one new detail each morning, the tiny crack in the mug handle, the shape of the steam, the way the shadows fall longer in winter months. The spoon clinked against the cup. Some mornings he writes. Just a few lines. Sometimes he doesn't write at all. Sometimes he simply watches his own thoughts flicker like candlelight on a dark wall. There's always enough quiet for remembering. He counts the heartbeats, waits for the tea to cool, lets his thoughts shuffle themselves slowly back into a line, like children called in from play. Shoes wait by the door, heavy leather, stiff against the cold. He'll slip into them eventually. But for now, he lets the robe hold his shape. He lets the cool air remind him that waking is not rushing, that a day cannot begin before the body says yes. He leans back in the chair, listens to the stove tick as it cools, bends his head, eyes closed, letting his nose fill with the scent of wool, tea, morning. Nothing happened, and that was enough. In the hush of an unchanged morning, Carl sits before his desk, a pale slice of wood, worn smooth by long evenings and small, patient movements. Each item has its place. A cup plain, filled with gentle heat, a notebook, corners softened by years of fingers and thought. He moves in slow circles, pick up the pen, set it down, reach for the lamp, feel the coolness of brass under hand, and trace the pattern of sunlight sliding in through the window. The world outside is stitched with patterns. The bell in the street, the trolley's groan, neighbors shuffling past in slippers and coats. Inside, only the hush of cloth brushing wood and the measured tap of pen to paper, again and again and again. Nothing urgent calls, only the breath of habit tugging him along, steady and slow. He takes the notebooks down from their shelf, stacks of time, pages half filled and left alone. Each volume has a certain weight, a friend of steady afternoons. Carl opens the cover and breathes in the scent of old ink and pressed paper. The day expands, but he remains inside this small, familiar circle. As he writes, his mind wanders, never in a hurry. He stops to look out the window, watching faint clouds pass over the mountain line, soft and grey, like thoughts drifting before sleep. The pen's tip waits on the paper, a pause that folds quietly into itself. He adjusts his seat. The chair's legs make a dull music against the floor. Nothing happens, and for this moment that is enough. As each word appears, he repeats an older dance. Pause, consider, continue. The tasks are not grand. The ink dries, the pages turn. He moves his tea to the other side of the table. Yet within this rhythm, something soft grows, a sense of meaning found not in change, but in gentle repetition. He writes, but he also listens, sometimes to the tick of the clock, sometimes to the winding of his own small worries. Each motion, smaller than the last, reminds him that making sense of a life is less about searching, more about returning over and over again to the same little rituals. He stays with these patterns, his mind moving across the room like soft weather. There's dust on the window ledge. He brushes it away, fingers slow, almost ceremonious. There are letters to be read, each one opened with careful hands, as if opening the past itself. Some reply slips out from him quietly. He folds the paper, slides it into an envelope, smooths it down. He lets his eyes rest near the window again. The hours slip by, but each feels the same, round, deliberate, echoing like footsteps on an old stone path. He closes the notebook. The cup is empty, the room unchanged. Yet each small act, removing the cap from the ink bottle, returning a pen to its box, straightening a stack of books, softens the world around him. Even a glance at the door, the way it sticks on cold days, becomes part of the unwinding routine. Work for him is not a forceful push forward, but a cradle. The repetition of little things, almost forgotten, often ignored. Scribbling a thought, erasing an error, tracing the grain of wood on the desktop, allowing silence to pool in the corners of the room. He waits by the window again. The street is empty, shadows stretching and blurring down the walk. He stands slowly, sets the cup near the sill, and lets his gaze wander as the next moment reaches him. His breath steady, his motions slower still. He thinks of the afternoon to come, each hour already familiar, already kind. There is a comfort in these patterns, a hush that leans against the bones, steadying. Carl surrenders to the work, not as a duty, but as a rhythm, one quiet note after another, spaced by silence, shaped by waiting. His hands hover over the table, remembering every object, a fountain pen, a worn-out stamp, the faint mark of a teacup on paper. Nothing rushes him. The spoon clinks against the cup, then quiet again. His day unfolds not with urgency, but the repeat of hands reaching, writing, folding, waiting. Objects seem to swap places. Ink bottle left, notebook right. His touch so slow, the air seems to thicken and settle. He allows each movement to become a meditation. He wipes crumbs from the cloth, unfolds a letter, closes his eyes. Everything returns softly to where it began. There are no answers found, no glory sought. Only the simple fact of being here for another loop around the day, each circuit gentler, each breath deeper than the last. You might imagine a particular morning unfolding in the quiet village where Carl Jung once found his rhythms. The world outside his window always seemed to move at its own unhurried pace. There would be light cloud resting gently above the rooftops, and the air held a kind of hush that you could feel in your bones. Each day, the weather gently smoothed the hard edges of his thoughts. He would watch as a soft brightness peered through the curtain, illuminating dust motes as they drifted. The quiet language of rain, or the barely there flutter of wind, changed the flavor of his morning, never urgent, always familiar. There were mornings where clouds rolled in with a gentle persistence, and everything felt wrapped in pale wool. No need for hurry, just a world slowly exhaling, making space for another day. Jung would pause, often by his study window, and listen to the steady patter or the slow retreat of mist over the fields. When the sky offered gentle grey, his work slowed. There was comfort in the softness of the light and the way it seemed to hush the rooms, as if everyone, plants, cats, even the ticking clock, agreed to move a bit slower. Some afternoons, a quiet sun would find him, long after he'd forgotten the hour. Light drifted toward him across the writing table, warming pages that felt cool to the touch. The warmth wasn't loud or sharp. It was as if it passed through layers of old fabric before settling on his hands. He would find himself pausing to notice these soft changes, sometimes looking past the figures on the page, letting the light touch his face. The weather became a companion, a gentle reminder to pause and begin again. There were days of unwavering grey, the kind that pulled him inward, deeper into his thoughts. On these days, Jung might draw a heavier shawl around his shoulders or find comfort in the way the corners of his room blurred into a gentler blue. He might make a pot of tea, the kettle humming as he watched the world blur beyond the glass. The air would taste a little different on days like these, quiet and ordinary. Shadows moved in slow tides across the floor. The warmth from the teacup became a kind of anchor, not exciting, just steady. Sometimes the light outside would shift, ever so little, reminding him of the months slowly passing. A single leaf would touch the ground on its way to becoming something new, or the grass would soften, resting beneath layers of quiet. The season's change was never abrupt. Instead, it softened time, like a song you already knew by heart. You feel it more than you understand it. He would reach for a heavier coat or open a window to let in different air. These small rituals became the grammar of his days. He waited by the window. The spoon clinked against the cup and nothing happened, and that was enough. The scent in the room changed as the seasons slid by. Wool and books in the cool months, old wood and pressed flowers in the gentle thaw of spring. Doors shut more softly, or squeaked their welcome as damp mornings gave way to dry ones. At night, he would sense the pull of the moon in how shadows grew softer on his desk. Some evenings, mist clung low on the river bank, and even the lamps did not chase it away. There was no need for brightness. Softness was a welcome guest. Jung noticed it all. the way the rain made his writing softer, or how sunlight pressed quietly into his sketches. The rhythm of weather set the tone of his inner world. Soft rain, slow wind, a hush as dusk entered quietly. Nothing demanded attention. The world simply moved and rested alongside him. A slow sigh, a door closed gently down the hall. The page of his journal lay open, waiting for something that didn't need to come right away. In these gentle shifts, in the patient repetition of days marked by tea and cloud and the warmth of a thick sweater, Jung found the pace that held him. His inner life mirrored the world outside, never sharp, never hurried, just a quiet unfolding, like fog lifting from a late morning field. He waited by the window, the world waited too. The room is quieter now, still. Sometimes the air seems to listen, holding its breath. At the edge of the afternoon, when the sunlight bends around stacks of books, Carl sits with another person, a friend, a student, the echo of his own childhood, and lets the space between them do most of the talking. Words aren't always needed. Sometimes it's just the sound of breathing, soft and even, or paper as it slips from one hand to another, rough and reassuring. The world moves slowly here, slower than a clock, slower than memory. Tea is poured, cups are passed. Karl's hands, broad and gentle, tilt the kettle and steam rises, turning the light murky and gold. Across from him, someone else, a quiet companion, touches their spoon to the rim and stirs. The scent of tea leaves opens in the small room. They don't need to fill the space with stories or teachings. They just exist. Two presences woven together by the simple act of sharing warmth. He breathes. She breathes. The tea cools just enough to sip. There's comfort in the smallness of it all. The soft clink of a cup meeting the saucer. Shadows moving on walls. Somewhere a door creaks. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. The world for this hour is gentle and restrained, just steady enough to rest your head upon. Sometimes Jung meets a friend while walking by the shore of his lake. Their boots tap against weathered stones, and the water moves in its long, patient rhythm. They do not talk of dreams, not here. They share the texture of silence. A crow calls out. Twigs bite beneath their soles. The only gesture is a slow exhale, sometimes a hand on a shoulder, walking side by side. They pass a small cottage. Smoke winds up, then is gone. Wind moves a curtain in the window. Carl watches, but he does not name what he notices. That isn't needed. His friend looks where he looks, puzzled or simply present. They wander a bit, and the hush between two minds becomes its own story. He lets questions dissolve before they're spoken. He knows that company, real company, is rarely about being seen or heard. It's a subtle thing, old and mysterious. The way a cat curls near your feet in winter, making no demand, just sharing warmth. He waited by the window. Sometimes people bring him their trouble. Words tumble out, anxious, bright, sharp as stone. Carl listens first not with ears, but with the steady calm at the center of his chest. He leans in, nods, offers a nod or an open palm, but rarely interrupts. He trusts the silence more than any advice. When the telling is done, he waits. The world softens, breath deepens. The person feels just a little more seen. They sip their tea. He smiles, small, and meets their gaze. The spoon clinked against the cup other days. Conversation drifts to dreams, but only in outlines. Like watching shadow puppets move on the walls, never trying to grab them. He never presses, never chases. He trusts that what matters will circle back in its own way, its own time. In the meantime, he's present for each small outward sign: a raised eyebrow, the twitch of a hand, the shiver that runs through someone when a memory passes by. He lets it be, breath between gestures, no rush, nothing forced, nothing happened, and that was enough. Sometimes the longest afternoons are spent in that gentle, wordless echo where being together is enough. Light fades, clocks tick, someone laughs just once. Carl's gaze holds a question he doesn't need to ask. They rest together in the hush, even as sighs come and go, even as dusk lowers itself over the lake. Nothing is lost. Every moment a silent offering to the mystery between souls, each presence a mirror reflecting and softening, never breaking the fragile surface of being. Time is slow here. Breath is steady. Connection grows in the cracks between words, in the space beneath a look or a gently shared silence. This is his favorite lesson, one that can't be spoken, only lived. There are days in a life that seem to ripple quietly, like a circle spreading in a bowl of cool, still water. Days with no claim to grand gestures or unfolding destiny. Nothing to earn a place in any record. These are the days when Carl might open his eyes to the pale dawn, finding the room unchanged, the lamp steady on the table, a soft burn lingering from last evening's hours. He didn't rush to meet the day. Not today. The house around him was hushed, the walls with their familiar weight, the slow creak of the wood pressing against its own memory. Jung lay there, half waking, staring at the ceiling, breathing in, holding the quiet, exhaling. Shadows on the ceiling played a gentle repeat, the faint movement of light through old glass, hesitating between grey and gold. Somewhere the kettle was not yet boiling. Some mornings you get up to bustle, to break the fast noise of living. Other mornings you drift. Today he drifted. He touched his hand to the edge of the blanket. The weave was rough, the kind of comfort that only comes from decades of use. Faint scent of wool, of linen, of the cold air left from the window's night draught. Outside the world moved, but not for him, at least not yet. He waited by the window. From the bed he could hear the clock in the hall, not ticking, just existing. He didn't count the seconds. The rhythm was enough. He closed his eyes and let time spill. There are mornings to rise, and mornings to simply remain, to fill the air with the innocent presence of being, not doing, not striving, just occupying an unchanged place, undisturbed. There is a sacredness to this. Even the dust shimmers differently in idleness. Tiny particles moving slow, caught by the low sun, circling in and out of shadow. Nothing happened, and that was enough. Carl sat at the edge of the mattress, noticing the ache in his ankles, a softened music from joints that knew the seasons. He waited another moment, steadying himself against the calm. The air in the room smelled faintly of yesterday's wood smoke. He listened. Sometimes it is the quietest hours that hold the densest meaning. As though the world finally had space for the gentle weight of his thoughts, he dressed slowly, hands pausing on each button. Rough linen shirt, woolen trousers, no urgency, only presence, lovingly routine. The window caught a patch of cloud, softening the morning even further. He waited by the window. Breakfast was an unhurried ritual. Bread broken with his hands, spread with the faintest film of butter. The knife made little noise. The egg, boiled simply, peeled at the table, steam rising in grey ribbons. He watched, not thinking of the day ahead, but holding each moment, tasting the heat and the salt, the way the crust gave way under his teeth. The spoon clinked against the cup. He looked out at the garden. The dead stalks of last year's flowers still held onto droplets from the evening's rain, brown and green blurring at the boundary of frost. He often wondered how plants felt about standing still, always in one place, leaning quietly toward the light that arrives or fails to arrive. He waited by the window. On such a day, he would take nothing with him. No notebook, no pen, no pile of letters. He carried his soul and his silence to a chair by the fire, feeling the scratch of the corduroy seat under his fingertips, the whisper as he settled down. Nothing grand, no inspiration required. Sometimes he spoke softly, a phrase to himself half thought. Other times he only listened. Beneath the silence, a kind of mercy. He noticed the leaves trembling in the wind outside, stirring as if to a music barely heard. He waited by the window. Lunch was simple, a bowl of broth, scattered with parsley, a slice of bread gone soft at the edge. He dipped, tasted, let the warmth move through him slowly, as if his insides needed soothing from the chill. Afternoon hours drifted without anchor. He might read a page, close the book, forget the words. He might sit listening to the hush outside, to the distant scatter of birds in the hedges. Sometimes he would walk the rooms, touching the frame of the window, the smooth edge of the desk, tracing the forgotten patterns in the carpet with his socked foot. He waited by the window. The sky moved and the light faded. He did nothing to chase it, only allowed the moments to gather in their quiet weight, settling as feathers on a winter coat. Evening meant a lamp lit in the corner, golden and low, the warmth of a blanket pulled over his knees. Dinner, perhaps, was shared with a loved one or in solitude. Either way it passed gently, with the buttered comfort of potatoes, the satisfying crumble of bread, the old scent of oil in the lamp. Night arrived softly, flames snuffed with a practiced pinch, the bed cool and waiting. Shadows stretched along the floor, blending into the walls, holding secrets meant only for stillness. The last sound might have been his own sigh in the darkness, the kind of exhale that lets you grow weightless, even as you remain forever anchored inside your one ordinary life. He waited by the window until sleep. And nothing happened, and that was enough. There was a desk pressed against the old window where the glass wavered with the memory of long ago hands pressing it into place. The world outside blurred into gray and blue. That was how mornings began for Karl, in the stillness of the same room, on the same weathered chair, under a ceiling that sometimes shook gently with the wind. He would glance at the street, then lower his gaze, pen poised between his fingers, the page waiting with quiet patience. Light crept over his shoulder. The desk had belonged to his grandfather, or maybe it was just his grandfather's presence that lingered like a faint cologne, never quite gone. In the hush, Karl lifted his pen, then paused, glancing at the paper again, then the window, then the far wall with its clock that rarely matched the hour. The pen returned to its waiting line, tracing half-formed words. He listened for the kettle's boil. Sometimes it whistled, sometimes it didn't. Those gaps of silence, they were important, as if the universe itself held its breath for every stroke of ink. He'd write a single word, let his eyes drift across the page, past the window, then back to the word, as if its meaning blossomed only in the spaces between each glance. One hand rested idly on the desk, fingers curled around nothing, thumb brushing the wood's shallow groove, then rising to fix the lamp's wick before lowering to scratch a fragment of thought upon the paper. He waited by the window, rain pressing its soft rhythm on the glass. Time circled the room, in the sweep of coat sleeves, the unfurling of long shadows under the desk, the repetitive lift and rest of the fountain pen. Paper absorbed his words without complaint, like bread takes in milk. Outside, a bird's movement caught his eye. The glancing stopped, the writing paused, and then, with a sigh, Karl's attention spiraled back to the page. The kettle settled. The day wore its ordinary clothes. Nothing happened, and that was enough. He would write a phrase, pause, read it again. A draft not of brilliance, but of repetition. The window, a space for waiting. The paper, a field the pen would wander over, first here, then there, never in a hurry. He tipped his head, listening to the thud of his own heartbeat, to the soft clicking of his tongue behind his teeth. Glance, write, pause, glance again. The chair creaked, the pen set down. He ran a palm over the wood, smoothing invisible wrinkles. From time to time he stood, walked to the window, lifted one blind, then let it fall again. His gaze met the world outside only briefly. Inside, a mug of tea cooled on the edge of his desk, leaving behind a milky ring. He touched the cup, let his fingers rest in warmth, then shifted, shifting the pen's position as if this might tilt the day into clarity. He wrote another word. The pen returned to its rest. He glanced at what he had written, then at nothing at all. He was always looking away, then back, always writing, then stopping. The rhythm was unimportant, or maybe it was everything. Like folding a blanket over and over, never quite laying it flat, never quite disturbing it. The morning fog thickened. He sighed into the stillness, his breath a cloud above cool paper, before returning to the gentle pattern. Eyes to the page, eyes to the window, hand to the pen, pen to the line. It was only through this weaving, this constant push and pull of sight and word and silence, that his thoughts found their shape. His mind moved like slow water, never rushing, never retreating, just circling the same stones over and over. Sometimes he would count his breaths, tapping out quiet rhythms against the desk's edge. 1, 2, 3, then letting his hand fall, palm open. A draft, a glance, a sigh, a word. Some mornings he left the page untouched, the view outside richer than any sentence he could offer. Some mornings he wrote until the words blurred like mist, and that was the only brilliance the day required. He lived in the gap between glancing and writing, repetition soothing as a lullaby. At the heart of every beginning there is this slow rhythm, the pen, the page, the window, and the man at the center, neither in the story nor outside it. Genius doesn't announce itself. It waits, patient, slow, and half asleep, ready to rise when the fog lifts, and not one moment before. There is a soft knowing to the hours when routine is an old friend, when each task and motion is familiar as breath. For Jung, the day began before sound, before the world itself seemed to stir. The window pane still cool, a shadow lingering on its edge. He would rise and pause for just a moment, the floor cool beneath his feet, the light aching to return, but not there yet. The shape of his robe was simple, wool a little coarse, pulling it around his shoulders like a memory. The belt, never quite tied, offered only a suggestion of closure. He would linger in its folds, feeling the roughness, the weight, the shroud it offered from the chill. Sometimes the hem would catch a loose splinter in the old wood. He paused, thumb tracing the threadbare edge. He would fold into its safety a little longer than needed, because there is no rush here. There is only the hush of slow footsteps across the floorboards. There was always an object, a thing resting where the light and shadow met. For Jung, it was a small, smooth stone. Most wouldn't notice it, or if they did, they might dismiss it as a river pebble, rounded by time and water, cool and unremarkable. But in his palm it had a different weight. Mornings would pass, the kettle settling into its hush, and the stone would be there, sometimes on the desk, sometimes pocketed away. He'd trace his thumb along the cool curve, not for luck, not for fortune, just to remember the feeling of the world, tangible and close. He would let his fingers close gently around its surface, closing, opening, as if rehearsing the mystery of holding, then letting go. In the late hours, surrounded by books, he'd place it beside his cup, near the curl of steam, the clink of porcelain. The object became an anchor between waking and dreaming, reminding him that thoughts, like stones, must be held loosely sometimes, resting rather than held captive. Sometimes the stone moved with him into the garden, the air damp and slow, the ground yielding under his steps. He'd sit quietly, feeling the coolness in his hand, watching leaves shiver at the edge of sight. The stone, soft as a breath, pressed lightly into his palm. It slowed his thinking, slowed his breathing, let the silence in a little more. He waited by the window, listening to the hush, fingertips tracing the etched lines, as if reading a secret script, the ordinary object, carrying the weight of 1,000 mornings, shaped by patient touch, absorbing the hum of a quiet mind. There were days when he'd forget it, the stone left on a shelf, the shelf layered in dust and old sunlight. But even then its memory lingered, a dull ache, steady and patient, like looking for your coat in winter and not minding the chill. At night the stone found its way back into his hand. Sometimes in sleep he'd curl around it, feeling its honest cold. The dreamless dreams of river stones, silent, unmoving, ever present. The object a lull, a bridge to gentler thoughts. Nothing happened, and that was enough. There is a settling that arrives with age, as dusk grows longer in the corners of each room. For Carl Jung, the softening of time was like sunlight crawling slowly across sun-bleached floorboards. The days stretched not with haste, but with the honeyed patience of evening light, warm, full, and unhurried. Even his breath seemed to notice, lingering just a bit longer, as if drawing in the flavor of every passing hour. He moved slower now, each step measured, a silent echo of longing and letting go. Evening's hush found him pausing in doorways, shadow falling across his shoes. Dusk pressed gentle blue against the window panes while his hands rested in his lap, each rise and fall of his chest a deliberate invitation to remember. He would sit by the fire after the world had gone quiet, tracing the outline of old notebooks with trembling fingers. The pages wore the delicate smell of years, ink, brittle paper, a hint of candle wax where he paused, always just to breathe. The windows reflected the muted orange of fading day, and he let himself feel that longing, a longing not for more, but for a return. Slow breaths followed the lengthening shadows, as if he could inhale time's memory and exhale its weight. Some evenings he would sigh just to hear the sound, a whisper against the settling dust. His eyes would drift toward the darkening garden beyond the glass, where dusk pulled its blue shawl tight. Even his longing moved slowly, like a cat threading through twilight. There was no hurry, nothing happened, and that was enough. In this season of slowness, he noticed more. The flicker of a moth in the lamp's glow, the way wood creaked beneath the settling house. His hands, once restless, now traced the rim of his teacup, circling the warmth. Dusk lengthened, breath deepened. Sometimes he would simply rest his forehead in his hand, and watch the golden stripe of late sun move across the table. Aging was a gentle dusk within the bones, a hush in each joint, a feathering of softness across the heart. With every quiet inhalation, he tasted longing, and with every exhalation, release. He learned to let memories drift like dust motes, visible in the angled rays, then gone, then gently returning. He paused by the window, watching the horizon blur into sleepy violet. He breathed, and dusk answered, settling over his shoulders like a threadbare coat he'd always known. The garden was a memory of itself, shrouded in evening blue. He remembered wild afternoons, now soft-edged, tucked under the cool hush of slowness. His longing did not ache any more. It simply existed, soft, slow, like dusk filtered through old glass. He often found himself walking the halls without direction, letting his footsteps echo between breaths. It was not sadness that filled the afternoon, it was space. Time itself seemed to stretch, loose and honeyed, holding him in its gentle fist. The slow, sacred rhythm of aging was not an intruder but a companion, a dog-eared book, a favorite coat, a trusted chair that carried the imprint of every quiet night. The quiet came with longing, longing came with breath. Dusk and breath, dusk and breath, a lullaby that always returned him to stillness. Each inhale held the memory of younger days, laughter rising from the garden, hands stained with ink and earth. Each exhale softened sharp edges, rounding the day into something bearable, even beautiful. He waited by the window, felt the air cooling his knuckles, let his chest rise and fall in rhythm with the night. The longing inside him became gentler as time slowed. Dusk gathered the world into a soft embrace, and Jung, old, unhurried, found a sort of homecoming in the hush between breaths, the shadow between heartbeats. He was both waiting and arriving, cradled by the gentle dusk, breathing longing in and out, as the night settled softly around him. Now there was mist most mornings. It crept in along the edges of the lake, soft and uncertain, the same way thoughts arrive when the mind grows gentle. The air always felt cooler, a little heavier, when Karl walked through the garden. Shoes damp from dew, he brushed yesterday's memories from his sleeves, finding quiet pleasure in the way the world began again each day, whether he noticed or not. Sometimes, as the sun hesitated just below the horizon, Karl thought about all the rooms he'd lived in, all the drowsy afternoons at his desk, and the way the light seemed to pool in corners, soft and golden, undisturbed. The room was quieter now, papers stacked in gentle disarray, cups dry with memory, the scent of books drifting beneath the surface of everything. He listened to the hush, to the gentle, slow rhythm of each breath. Nothing happened, and that was enough. Older now, Karl found time drifting thick like honey. Some days letters waited to be opened. Some days they waited and waited, and the quiet outlasted even the most pressing thoughts. He remembered the cup of tea placed beside him, steam curling in the slow sun. The window, perhaps cracked a finger's width, let in a hush of cool air. Shadows stretching across the wall like old, silent companions. It was easy to forget the hour, or even the day, when routines blurred into rituals and rituals softened into memory. He waited by the window. Walking became slower. Each step through the house brought back another echo, creaking floorboards, the murmur of distant voices, the distinct quiet of solitude. Sometimes he paused in the hallway, letting his hand glide over the smooth wood of the banister, tracing the same path he'd walked for years. Sometimes the dust caught the light just so, and Karl wondered, with a kind of soft hope, whether meaning could be found in simply watching the world go by. He rested by the garden door. Chairs in the garden had a shape all their own, molded by decades of use, softened by sun and rain and the gentle persistence of moss. He ran a hand across the armrest. It was just wood, just an ordinary chair. But somehow, in the patience of its waiting, it became something more, a friend, a witness, a place to wait while the world moved gently beyond the hedge. The spoon clinked against the cup, no need to read or write or explain. Karl let his mind empty, let the waves of small, forgotten moments wash up like driftwood along the shoreline of his awareness. Blue shadows thickened in the evening. The garden faded behind a veil of fine rain. Inside, the clock ticked, each second measured and unhurried. The day gave way to rest, not quite dreamless and never fully awake. He listened to the hush sometimes. He watched the flicker of a candle, flame steady, even as his own hands trembled. He tucked his feet beneath a woolen blanket. Every object in the room had softened with age, each surface bearing the brush of fingertips and time. The smell of paper, tea, old wood, fabric, familiar as breath, grounding as bread. He let himself become still, as if waiting for a story he already knew by heart. Nothing happened, and that was enough. When others came by, their voices seemed to float in softly, as if not to disturb the slow, patient silence that had settled in his rooms. They asked questions in gentle tones, but Karl preferred to answer with a smile or a nod, sometimes nothing at all, not from rudeness, but because the need for words had faded, replaced by the hush where memory and imagination met and blurred. He sat by the window again. Every afternoon the shadows grew longer. The line between memory and imagination melted like fog in the warmth of the late sun. Faces from years ago flickered at the periphery. Voices, laughter, even the old aches drifted through his thoughts, gentle as breath. He let them pass through, unhindered. Every sigh, every pause felt sacred now. The spoon rested beside the cup, and now, as the evening quiet folds in, there is nothing needed. No place to go, no more asking. Only the slow descent, the gentle surrender, the gradual release. This is the time for letting go. This is the hush before dreams, the sleep that waits with open hands, ready to receive whatever you bring, ready to hold all you are and all you're letting be. The house is dark, but not empty. Karl's footsteps have faded. The kettle is cooled. The rooms are filled with the memory of his breath, the calm clinking of his porcelain cup, the echo of weighty silence after words. Everything rests. Everything is soft across the windowsill, across his desk, across the wide lands of the unconscious night. Let yourself lean back as he did. Let go of the worry coat, of the old, heavy thoughts. Notice the curve of the blanket, how it pulls gently around you, how it hums with memory and with quiet. Like Carl at the end of a long day, you can let the tension drop from your shoulders. The world narrows to a warm point here in your quiet room. Here you can remember nothing and wish for nothing more. He would sit, eyes half closed, feeling the lateness arrive. Shadows crowded round the lamp, gentle and slow, like friends coming to carry him away, each shadow a soft hand, an invitation, a veil lowered over mind and muscle, over waking and will. Night gathers up pieces of day, stacks them, one quiet memory at a time. He watched the darkness collect the corners. He smiled. He let it come. The breath drifts deeper, slower. The mind unhooks from its anchors, sailing out into deeper water where the thinking voice grows dim. Karl knew this state. knew how to let the old stories close their covers, how to trust the night to hold him. You know it, too. In this hush there is no part of you that must keep watch. He would listen for the wind in the pine trees outside, pressing against aging glass. He would listen for the pulse of the world, slow, slow, slowing still. He would imagine the cool river beyond his house, sliding between stones, a lullaby for weary thoughts. And there in that darkness, he would rest. The chair creaks, the world holds its breath. Sometimes you think you hear footsteps, the memory of someone familiar returning to tuck you in. No words now, just quiet, just stillness. The body softens, weight and warmth cradling the bones. You are safe. You are unhurried. The faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the back of your mind. A distant dog barks, then falls silent. There is only this, one slow, sacred moment, stretching out like water under moonlight. Carl believed in dreams. He believed in the journey of the night, where every person finds their own mountain, their own silent shore. You're almost there. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Feel your hands relax, your chest rising and falling, the comfort that overtakes thought. This is a season of rest, and you are allowed to take it all the way in. Let the quiet hum in your ears. Let it fill in all the spaces where worry once lived. He waited by the window, he listened for peace, and peace replied. The darkness, soft as velvet, folded over him and waits for you too. There is no measure to the rest ahead, only the slow unraveling of color and sound, of memory and meaning. It is all put down now. It is night. Carl used to whisper to himself, a mantra for sleep, a softness for the soul. He might have said, "Here all is held, here even the broken pieces glow. Here I am carried." You can say it too, in your own way here, all is held, here even the broken pieces glow, here I am carried. And again, just a little quieter, here all is held, here even the broken pieces glow, here I am carried. Let the world slip away, slow as fog, gentle as water. Let the sleep take you softly, lovingly, over the edge into the deep. You are safe. You are whole. You are remembered. You are home. The night is long, but it loves you. The quiet is deep, and there is a light still inside you, waiting for another day. Good night from the modern mystic and from Carl, and from the stillness that watches over everyone, everywhere, until the world turns again. Somewhere, beyond the hum of clocks and the faint scuff of slippers on wooden floors, there is a quiet thread weaving through the hours. It pulls gently, not in haste or demand, just a cord of dawn and dusk coiling around soul truth, inviting in the hush. In this late, forgiving night, the world rests into Karl's lap, cold air curling at the seams, lamplight making golden silhouettes along his study wall. There is tea on the desk, just cooled, the faintest pattern of steam barely rising before surrendering back to quiet. Karl sits, and he sits. He breathes through the fog, holding a slip of paper in his hand, the edge worn from being folded and unfolded a dozen times in the same evening. He feels the warmth slowly leave his cup. He watches the silhouettes. He listens for what lingers in the pauses. A pencil rests, ignored, across the empty page. His eyes drift to the window, where frost ghosts trace invisible language across the midnight pane. He notices the dust caught by the lamplight. He does nothing. Nothing happens, and that is enough. This night is not unlike countless before it. The slow spiral of his thoughts circling something just out of reach, longing not for answers, but for the simple brush of what remains, a divine remainder, the breath held between two notes, the empty between lines of script, divine, incomplete and softly his. He exhales, shoulders rounding, the room's shadows stretching as the hour grows heavier. There is something musical in the repetition of these evenings. Sip, wait, listen. Pause, recall, release. His soul drifts, then anchors, weaving memory with mystery, sorrow with acceptance, truth with longing. In the thick hush, the mantra returns. Everything that matters